How high's the water, mama? 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, papa? She said it's 2 feet high and rising. Well, we can make it to the road in a homemade boat, 'cause that's the only thing we got left that'll float. It's already over all the wheat and oats, 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, mama?
Hi, welcome back to White Fox Vintage Snowmobile. This will be part 8 of the W project. Now, I said in the past I would reveal what the W project was, and I'm leaving you video hints quite often. Another hint is that it does have something to do with NASCAR. If you watch NASCAR, you might see what I'm talking about. Anyway, today's video will be getting the track studs installed and put the work on the front drive axle, sprockets, install the skid and things like that. Now it's now getting toward the middle of July. I took most of this video footage earlier in the year, but I'm just editing now, and we're in the full summer schedule here, so not much time for anything. But thanks for tuning in, and if it's terribly boring, turn it off, go watch something else. But if you're wanting to build a vintage ice sled, maybe there'll be a few hints or tips, and you can avoid some of the mistakes that I'm making. So the next step is to stud the track. The studs came in yesterday from the Stud Boy Racer program, thanks to Sheldon. And we have a 121 here, as you saw earlier, mostly pre-drilled. I think we've got 48 more holes to drill. I rigged up a pipe here that we can easily turn the track as we work on it, so we'll without building a proper track stand to stud the track. I don't do this for a living, so just to make things a little easier, I built this template years ago for studding tracks. There's a few mistakes been made in here, but it gives a nice pattern, in tight and then out in the V like you see. So we'll go ahead and mark the track on this side with a paint marker and drill some more holes. So I told my wife I was trying to do some studding, and she said, "You're probably too old for that, man." Then I explained I was studying the track on the snowmobile, on the ice racer. She said, "Oh, I understand." But we had started here yesterday, did quite a few, but I just thought I'd show you. Now this track has been pre-drilled in most places, and it's actually pre-drilled for the push-through studs as opposed to the T-nut stud, which is what I have got from Stud Boy. Anyway, I'm having a bitch of a time getting the T-nuts in. So what we've ended up doing is taking my step drill, as opposed to just a drill, and running it through the hole just to burn it out a little bit. So we'll do one or two. So that opened the hole up a wee bit. And I borrowed a stud or a T-nut installation tool from Kyle at Silver Star Racing, but it seemed like it wanted to strip the T-nuts before they were pulled in. So I devised a little tool here. Now this is a prototype, and I would do things a little differently. I'd actually jig this up in the lathe and turn out a slug that's perfect. But anyway, it's just a series of bushings that once you put the wrench on it, it pulls the inside of the T-nut right into the slot. So we'll see if we can show you how that works. T-nut goes on through the thread and then just a nut. Now I set my clutch on my handy dandy Craftsman drill driver to 19 on the scale. That seems to pull the T-nut sufficiently in there. Now the studs, I have put a little drop of Loctite on all of them, because when we go picking the flags up off the oval racetrack, we always pick up a few handfuls of studs, and they're $1 to $2 each. So, and we have some nice stud boy backers. So if we can get that started by a thread or two. Which is there. Now I haven't been really too fussy with lining the plates up. I should be, but I failed. And then we just grabbed our impact driver and a 3/8 deep set, and I pretty much rattle these in as far as they'll go. And that's one done. Now I do a dozen at a time just to save mixing the job up a little, and I think we're designed for 192. I've got about 60 done, so we'll see you in a while. I finished the studs today, so if this track has 48 lugs to 121, and 4 studs per lug, we should be at 192. That should be lots to haul my butt around the track. They are deadly little devils. They're very sharp, so we'll wear some gloves when we're handling that beast, but we'll put it away for now, and when we get back at the chassis we'll get that installed, and then it can be out of the way and the suspension can get put in too. So, well, there's Jenny. What you doing, Jenny? Wag your tail. Good girl. Well, we're outside today, and our current job on the hoist, we have the wrong piston ordered, not by me, thanks. So I'm working on the plywood to go under the seat foam. Now it's usually 3/8, but I didn't have a good piece of 3/8, so I have some 3/4 inch preserved wood, which is it'll make a good base. And I have mounted my mounting bracket ahead of stock. This chassis was drilled for the old gas tank and the new gas tank, and so we'll just see how this fits. I expect I'll have to do a little bit of router work to get that to slide under, and we will. But we'll mark that out and make it fit somehow. So we put a bolt with a washer through. is the way that works. I have just lag bolted my seat through the bottom of the tunnel to the plywood, and that would work fine, but I think this is a little bit better fix. So I've cut the front of that piece of plywood out and routed a recess for the clamp to fit into. And I have installed one T-nut. That's a 3/8 T-nut. You can get them at a hardware store. They just suck in with a bolt, so I'll show you that in a bit more detail. Put the second one in, and then hopefully show you how it all fits. And there's the finished product. Sorry about the bright sun. Now hopefully that'll push on there once the upholstery's on. It'll be a bit of a wrestle because it's fitting pretty tight, but we can deal with that later. I left the back open for my tail lights. We'll have for sure one good big bright tail light working off the lighting coil, but I'll have also a battery operated one. I don't want to miss a heat or miss a race because I have no tail light, so we will supply a backup. And we'll put plenty of grease in those. Those buggers look like they'll rust. Been a while since we worked on the W project. Ran smack dab into Saskatchewan spring, and had to go out and ride our motorcycles and go walleye fishing on the North Saskatchewan River, and put a new top on the deck and replumb part of the house, and on and on and on. But we have to keep at this project, or this winter when Kyle gets some ice on his slough, we're going to be wanting to be out there doing a little tuning on this carcass. So we're about to put the porcupine track in the chassis, but I've reconsidered my drive sprockets. The factory drive sprocket is 9-tooth with a 1-inch shaft, and I happen to have a set of 8-tooth here. The gearing I had in this with this race engine and the TX that we had was pulled pretty good in 660 feet, but totally no hole shot. And experimented with lower gears, but if I put the 8-tooth drivers in, I can always gear up through the chain case and get it optimal. But I can't always gear down in the chain case without the 15-tooth sprockets getting a little hard to find for the top. So we'll press the 9-tooth sprockets off and put the 8-tooth sprockets on, and then we'll for sure have lots of stud clearance in the tunnel, and can always go back if that's what the snowmobile gods want us to do. So we'll work on that. Now I've carefully marked and measured where the sprocket center line is in relation to the ends of the shaft, so that we're lined up in the chassis. We don't want any conflict with the drive lugs, which will cost us power and therefore cost us the race. So the first job, I pressed one sprocket off already with my handy hydraulic press. We'll press the other one off and see if we can line them up. Takes a few strokes. So we're almost there. That is off. Now you do have to be careful with sprockets. The standard older design for rubber tracks was a 2.52 pitch, which meant the lugs were 2.52 inches apart. Skidoo used 1.97 for a long time, and now you can get a 2.86 pitch and a 3-inch pitch, and I think a 3.29. So you got to be careful. Also, your center shaft. This is Yamaha and Polaris had looks like they had back in the day anyway, a 1-inch shaft. The trail twister is 1 3/8 shaft, so you have a hard time buying smaller sprockets for that. Anyway, next step is to press on the new sprockets. Now, also to be careful, it's a 6-sided hex shaft with 8 teeth. It would be easy to get this out a turn. There's only so many places that it'll line up, but most sprockets have an arrow on them. So if you can line those arrows up, then you should be synchronized. Lots of stroking. So we're very close to where we have to be. So we have the top, this sprocket is pressed on dead on where the other one was before. We just want 1 or 2 more strokes on this other guy, and we should be good to go. Not liking the way this is lining up. We're satisfied with the sprockets where they ended up. So we've pushed the porcupine track into the chassis. I run a 3/8 rod from mounting hole to mounting hole just to hold it up out of the way. And we got a tarp strap over here. So we'll see if we can push this axle into place. Shaft isn't quite slid over into the chain case. We might have to get rough. There. That seems like a pretty good alignment. We've got (5/8 to 3/4) clearance on either side of the track in the tunnel, so that's awesome, man. So we'll look for a bearing to put in here. So the bearing flange fits in that side of the chassis. And then the 6205 bearing with the locking collar. These used to have an eccentric collar you hit with a hammer. Now they come with set screws. And that's a good one. It's got metal shields in it. Fits in so. And then another flange. So. And we'll bolt it up. Normally there would be an angle adapter here for your speedometer cable, but with this race sled, I'll probably know exactly when I'm losing. I don't have to look at a speedometer. Whoops. Put these bolts in with the carriage head inside the tunnel. There's no clearance issues here. These, in contrast to that, are the other way because the clutch sits here and it gets pretty close. So we've set the suspension in place. It seems to be happy in there. Now the always enviable job of trying to get the bolts in by yourself, but we'll see if we can line them up. This suspension will have mounted as far up into the tunnel as possible for low center gravity again. If we were going for deep snow performance, we'd mount them down in these lugs here, these bolt holes, but we'll see where we end up. We also have to have the heel of the track maybe making more pressure than the front, so that we have good ski pressure, good cornering. We wrestled the suspension in, quite straightforward. We went in the top mounting hole to get the front of the skid up as far as we can. There'll be a lot of fine tuning once we get to the track. And we drilled the last pre-drilled hole. Polaris had pre-drilled that last hole, but it wasn't open, so we drilled it, got a bolt started there. So we're not sitting on the right skis, which will be a North Star 20-inch aluminum ski, and we're not sitting down on the surface. I don't want to get my sharp picks all dulled up before we get started, but I think it's looking pretty promising. We'll see how it steers when we do get on the ice. So we'll tighten the track and maybe throw the gear set in to the chain case before we get too far. We haven't tightened the set screws on that front bearing yet.
How high's the water, Mama? 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Papa? She said it's 2 feet high.